have some of these problems out here. So we can see a little bit of that light precipitation once again. Few breaks in that you might get, and just seeing the sun has kind of been an event lately for the south. It's been so wet lately. Up through the northeast, that front starts to come through. So ahead of that, some warmer temperatures, but then the temperatures will cool behind. California, more of the same now. Oregon will start to get some relief because we're going to see that in a couple of days. So as we deal with all of that, here's the pattern that we are dealing with, that lingering area of low pressure. It's been pretty stagnant. The jet stream is to the north. You might have just heard us talking about this, but without that pattern change, you don't get the weather systems kind of moving through and then clearing through like they normally do. Finally, this weekend, though, the jet stream shifts its way a little bit farther to the south, and as that pushes south, it finally shoves out some of that moisture, and we are saying so long, because I think a lot of people in the south are getting a little bit sick of it, or have been sick of it for some time. In the meantime, this could lend to more drought relief for parts of Texas. Take a look here. So here's the area highlighted in red. That's the core of some of our most extreme drought out there. And we could watch a couple days of these chances for rain, including San Antonio or Corpus Christi. Although for Corpus, it's a good thing, bad thing. Bayfest is going on this week, and always a great event out there. So the wet weather doesn't cooperate, but when you need the wet weather, it's definitely a balance. Friday, looks like Dallas could have a little bit more sunshine in that forecast. So for the next couple of days, this puts us into Thursday. Now you can see where the core of some of that moisture is going to be. It's going to be hit and miss through different parts of the south, but really until we start to get into Sunday and even Monday, this doesn't clear out entirely. So you can see how our Thursday is going to look with more chances for some thunderstorms, but also some breaks out here where we might get to see a little bit of that orb in the sky we haven't seen a lot of lately. Yes, the sun has been making some brief appearances out there. As we get to the forecast then for the next couple of days, here's how all of that shakes out. Still a lot of moisture out there that we are going to see. So we can see both Thursday with the thunderstorms around the area and Friday with more of the same, that it could be more problems for flooding rain if you are already one of those areas saturated and you get under more of this pattern. Otherwise, as we continue off to a few other parts of the country, well, Atlanta, Georgia, we will stay in the 80s, and you know, we have all the Gulf in town this weekend as well. Looks like as we get into Sunday, this really starts to improve. 80s, the pattern starts to dry out a little bit more and then stays drier. Great news for those that have gone through the flooding, because you still need the time to dry out, recover, air out things from your home, and just get things back on track. Thursday's forecast in the northeast includes still mild as we get the coastline, because that's where the front hasn't gone through yet. So New York City at 79 degrees. You get cooler behind that on the backside of the front. Buffalo at 71 for the Thursday forecast. Most of the moisture stays southward of this area, more toward the mid-Atlantic. So as we look at New York City for the next couple of days, here's that temperature tumble that I was mentioning. 70s into the 60s, about a 10-degree drop out here. Stay cool for a couple days, then that next area starts to come in. Temperatures increase, but so do some of those chances for rain out there. As we take a look at parts of the Midwest, it's going to be more of the same. We get a little bit of moisture through northern parts of the Midwest over the next couple of days. Chicago on the cusp of this. We could see just a few more clouds start to infiltrate in for the day tomorrow, but then it's really Friday and Saturday that we have some of those chances for rain. We'll have more on the California fires next. And low pressure to the south of this, the flow around those, it's just funneling in those winds. We do have the next weather system starting to come in the northwest, and this will eventually drop temperatures here. That'll be good news for places like Oregon, where we also have had some new fire concerns out here, but that cool air will not hit Southern California, and that's where we could really use it to help with some of those fire conditions. Here's what we'll have over the next couple of days then. The trough that is dug in, cool air associated with that, but with the ridge in place before that starts breaking down, still warm air through the west coast. We've got the winds I was just talking about, and then the humidity. That has been extremely low, so it's very dry out there. So hot, dry, wind, none of that good conditions for some of those fires. As we take a look at other parts of the west, what we will see in our forecast then, Seattle, you can see the benefit of that front coming in. Temperatures drop from the 80s to about 70 degrees for the rest of our Thursday forecast, but Los Angeles stays very warm at 92 degrees. And temperatures in the meantime, you can see this contrast of some of the warm air versus the cooler stuff coming in the northwest. In fact, we'll talk more about temperatures coming up in the weekly planner next. Just noticed some slightly cooler temperatures with all of that, though. And speaking of cooler temperatures, yeah, we have it with that low pressure area. 40s. That's a little bit more in the higher elevations that we get the temperatures that cold, but definitely feeling almost like we skipped right from summer to winter instead of fall. We'll recover this over the next couple days, though. We also start to see some cooler air come in to the Pacific Northwest, and that's with that next system that will come in. So as we put all of that into motion for Friday, the showers that we see in the Rockies, they start to lift, and we get more rain in places like Minnesota and Wisconsin, places we could actually use some of this rain. Don't need any of this, though, in the southeast. It does continue. We'll start to get a break, and I'll have that for you in just a couple days forward from here. But as we get into Friday's high temperatures, you can see where we've got some of that rain in the north. That's going to bring temperatures into the 60s a little bit more. Saturday's forecast. Showers anywhere from the Great Lakes all the way southward, but we start to see that clearing line. And that's going to be really kind of a godsend for parts of the south where we're just washing away in some cases. We also watch with this coming in that could still bring some rain to places like Corpus Christi, Bayfest going on, or as we head to Ohio and Geneva, the grape jamboree is out there, and certainly all those events like the grape stomping and the eating. Every festival has to have some eating, right? The winemaking, well, that should look better for the day on Sunday out here. Up and down the East Coast, that's where we have the scattered storms. But look, a lot of the south starts to clear out, and that is just incredible news after all the wet weather that we have been dealing with. So that'll be very, very beneficial. So by Sunday, a lot of the country improves and still pretty comfortable. Fall temperatures as we get to the northern tier, 60s. That'll help turn some of those leaves, the colors a little bit more. Midsection of the country, we've got 70s. So a nice weekend once we clear through some of that crud. Monday's forecast as we take it back to work, kind of more of the same. We'll see the showers, the wind up around the northeast. That's that next area. And with this, some of those temperatures kind of stuck in the 50s where you're getting the wet weather. Otherwise, most of the country very dry out here. Southern tier, just some scattered storms kind of around I-10, but most of the south has dried out significantly by this point, and that is great news. Here's those 50s that I was talking about. We still stay very warm in parts of the southwest, and hopefully we have a little bit more fire containment by the time we get into next Monday. As we get into Tuesday's forecast, a really quiet one. Most of the country is going to be drier. Still a couple showers up the northeast and another area starting to come in from the northwest, but a nice dry forecast as we hit the southeast once again. Well, the weekend is just around the corner and we got you some of that outlook, but we'll take a closer look next. Lately, no doubt about that. The other thing that we're seeing interesting on this shot, you can kind of pick out a little bit moisture, especially as these frames start up. Some of that is still remnants of Fred that kind of got merged into all that moisture. Remember Fred? Way back on the other side of the Atlantic, it was a hurricane. Well, a little bit of thunderstorm cluster kind of trucked its way across, never redeveloped into an actual system, but enough moisture to just enhance some of those showers that we saw in the Carolinas. Otherwise, the rest of the Gulf, very quiet, not looking for any development here because we just have such a tremendous amount of what we call wind shear. The winds at upper levels are not favorable when they're just screaming along like that. Those storms aren't able to really build up into the atmosphere. So no areas that we're watching. We certainly have a little moisture around parts of Central America, but nothing that is causing us a concern in terms of some tropical development. You can also see some showers around parts of, as we get out to the Dominican Republic, for example, headed toward Puerto Rico. Watch for a little bit of that rain activity. But otherwise, very quiet, a little spin in the upper atmosphere, but nothing that we're concerned about near Bermuda. And taking the broad picture, also very, very quiet. Even off of Africa, a lot of times this time of year, we see a couple little areas lining up. We haven't seen any of that. So that actually begs the question, you know, just how quiet are we? Well, remember last year, we had storm after storm. One hit the U.S. coastline. Remember Dolly, Edward, Faye, Gustav? I mean, so it seemed like everything we had almost headed for the U.S. coastline. We haven't had that this year. We had Cristobal, but that was a pretty insignificant storm, to be honest. Most things have stayed away from the United States. So that's one reason it feels like it's been a less active season. But the other reason, it really has been a less active season. We've been in a busy period recently. This season is trending more toward an average season versus the busier seasons that we've been in, and that trend we've been in. But also, the last time you get to this day in September, where we've only had 6 named storms, You have to go all the way back to 1997. So this has been the kind of slowest season, at least in terms of named storm, that we've had in over a decade. So that's our look at the Atlantic. As I said, pretty quiet out here. This isn't the only game that we have in town, though. As we head toward the eastern Pacific, a little bit of a different story. We're already up to the ending. Tropical storm Nora is churning out here now with winds to 60 miles per hour, although in these last couple frames starting to look a little less healthy. And that's going to be the trend over the next couple of days. It's going to head out into some cooler water, less favorable winds, and eventually it will lose some of that intensity, the whole time moving away from land. And this isn't a tropical feature, but just one little gee whiz, you can really see that next front starting to push its way into the west coast.